What if I told you that almost everything you've been taught about money is wrong? Or, at the very least, dangerously incomplete? What if the real path to wealth has nothing to do with a high-paying job, but everything to do with a massive shift in your thinking? Well, today, we're diving deep into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the book that completely turned the world of personal finance on its head. I mean, think about it. You've heard the old advice a million times, right? Go to school, get good grades, find a safe, secure job. But Robert Kiyosaki, the author, he argues that in today's fast-changing world, that's actually some of the riskiest advice you can possibly follow. This explainer, it's all about the other path, the path the wealthy actually teach their children about money. All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to look at the two wildly different mindsets that shaped Kiyosaki's entire life. We'll break down the rat race, that trap that keeps so many people stuck. We'll get into the number one lesson: don't work for money. And we'll reveal the huge secret of assets versus liabilities. Then we'll talk about your greatest asset and how you can start seeing opportunities everywhere. So the entire book is built on this really fascinating, true story. As a kid, Robert Kiyosaki basically had two dads. There was his own father, who he calls his poor dad. Now, this guy was a brilliant, highly educated man, the head of education for the entire state of Hawaii. And then there was his best friend's father, his rich dad, who was an entrepreneur who never even finished the 8th grade. The crazy thing is, both men were successful in their own right, but one struggled with money his whole life, while the other became one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. And just look at the difference here. It is night and day. Which one of these sounds more like what you grew up hearing? Is it poor dad, saying things like, "I can't afford it"? That's a statement. It's a full stop. It ends all creative thought. Or is it rich dad, who turns that statement into a question? How can I afford it? You see the difference? One is a dead end. The other is a challenge that forces your brain to start looking for solutions. This right here is the key to everything. So what's the big deal with this new mindset? What problem does it actually solve? Well, it's the key to escaping what Rich Dad called the rat race. And this is the endless, exhausting cycle that most people, especially the hardworking middle class, find themselves completely trapped in. The rat race is basically a life lived on autopilot, driven by two powerful emotions: fear and desire. Think about it. The fear of not being able to pay your bills, that's what gets you out of bed into a job you might not even like. But then you get that paycheck and desire kicks in. You start thinking about all the cool stuff you can buy: a nicer car, a bigger house, that new phone. So you spend the money, and before you know it, you need more, and that fear comes creeping right back. So you work harder. Maybe you get a raise, but your lifestyle just expands to match it. You're running faster and faster on a hamster wheel, but you're not actually getting anywhere. And this leads us to Rich Dad's first and maybe most shocking lesson. It's the absolute core of his entire philosophy. To get out of the rat race, you have to fundamentally change how you see your job. You have to learn not to work for money. This is it. This is the whole game, right here. Most people spend their lives trading their time for money. The rich, they do something completely different. They build or buy things, assets that make money for them. And as we're about to see, Rich Dad taught this lesson in a way that Robert Kiyosaki would never, ever forget. It's a really great story. When he was just 9 years old, Kiyosaki asks Rich Dad to teach him how to get rich. Rich Dad says, "Okay, I'll teach you, but you have to come work for me." So he gives him this job dusting cans in one of his stores for a measly 10 cents an hour. After a few weeks of this, Kiyosaki is furious. He feels totally used and underpaid. So he marches in to quit, and Rich Dad just smiles. He says, "Good, you're finally getting angry. Now you're thinking like most of my employees." He explained that life pushes you around, and you can either let it control you or you can learn from it. Then he makes a new offer. Keep working, but now for zero pay. He wanted to force them to stop thinking about a paycheck and start looking for an opportunity. Now, working for free sounds crazy, right? But it completely opened their minds. It forced them to see the world differently. And this led to the single most important rule in the entire book. Rich Dad told them, if you want to be rich, you have to know the difference between an asset and a liability. First, an asset. Now, forget all the complicated definitions you've heard before. Rich Dad's version is pure genius in its simplicity. An asset is simply something that puts money in your pocket. That's it. It generates income for you whether you're working or not. And on the flip side, of course, you have a liability. And it's just as simple. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. It's an expense.
This one simple distinction is the secret to understanding why the rich get richer.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly. Look at the cash flow. The poor get income from a job and it goes straight out to expenses. Rent, food, taxes. For the middle class, income from a job goes towards buying liabilities that they think are assets. A big house with a mortgage, a car payment, credit card debt. All that money just flows right out the door. But the rich, they focus on one thing: buying and building assets. Real estate, businesses, stocks. Those assets generate more income, and they use that income to buy, you guessed it, even more assets. It's a powerful, self-sustaining cycle. So right now, you might be thinking, okay, I get it. I need to buy assets. So what's the first one I should get? Stocks? Real estate? And Rich Dad's answer might surprise you. He says the most powerful asset we all have, the one we need to invest in first, is our mind. Your financial intelligence is what truly creates wealth. And we're coming full circle back to that first big idea. Poor Dad's mindset was to say, I can't afford it. It's a statement. It's a full stop that lets your brain get lazy and just give up. Rich Dad, on the other hand, insisted on asking, how can I afford it? That's a question. It's an engine starter. It forces your brain to wake up, get creative, and start solving problems. You know, Rich Dad said that saying I can't is just a form of mental laziness. Your financial brain is a muscle. Just like you go to the gym to make your body stronger, you have to exercise your mind to solve financial problems, to become wealthier. The more you challenge it, the stronger and the more profitable it becomes. Okay, so what actually happens when you start doing this? When you shift your focus from just getting a paycheck to exercising your financial mind? Well, something pretty amazing happens. You start to see opportunities that were literally invisible to you before, opportunities that are right under your nose. And the comic book library is the absolute perfect example. So remember, Kiyosaki and his friend are now working for free. Their minds are wide open. And they notice that the store manager is ripping the covers off the unsold comic books to send back for credit and then just throwing the rest of the perfectly good comic book in the trash. So their brains, now trained to find opportunities, start firing on all cylinders. They asked the distributor if they could just have the old comics. He said sure. So they cleaned out a room in the basement, opened up a comic book library for all the neighborhood kids, charged them 10 cents admission, and even hired the little sister to run it for them. I mean, think about how amazing that is for a couple of kids. They created an asset out of something that was being thrown in the garbage. It was a business that made them money, about $9.50 a week, which was a ton back then, even when they weren't physically there. This was their first incredible lesson in how to have money work for them. So what's the game plan? How do you start to apply this to your own life? Well, it really boils down to these 4 steps. First, you have to get a handle on your emotions. Recognize when fear and greed are driving your decisions. Second, never stop learning. Invest in your financial education. Third, you have to master that simple, powerful difference between an asset and a liability. And finally, you start training your brain to look for opportunities, not just for your next paycheck. Ultimately, the whole message of the book comes down to this. Your mind is like a computer, and your financial life is just a printout of whatever software is running on it. So the only question left is, what thoughts, what programs are you going to choose to install? Look, everything we've talked about today is just the tip of the iceberg. It's the foundation. But if you are really serious about escaping the rat race for good and mastering this way of thinking, the entire blueprint is waiting for you in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We've dropped a link right in the description for you to grab your own copy. And of course, if you want more explainers like this one that will challenge the way you think about success, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.